the fluorescent lights of the courtroom hum, a dull counterpoint to the frantic thumping in my chest. My hand, liver-spotted and trembling slightly, gripped the worn wooden armrest of the witness stand. I, Edward Thompson, 82 years old, was suing my own daughter-in-law, Melissa, for breach of contract. A subtle test, you might call it, one designed to expose decades of hidden resentments, a father's heartbreaking revelation, his family's true colors. Mr. Thompson, the lawyer, a young man barely out of law school with a nervous tick in his left eye, prompted, "Could you please explain to the court the nature of this contract objection?" Melissa's lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in a power suit, barked, "The validity of the contract is still in question." Judge Miller, a stern woman with a face like granite, teared down from the bench, overruled. "Mr. Thompson, you may proceed." I cleared my throat, the sound echoing unnaturally in the hushed room. My gaze drifted towards Melissa, sitting ramrod straight beside her lawyer. She avoided my eyes, her lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. I could practically feel the waves of her indignation radiating across the room. It was a familiar expression, one she'd worn often in the last few years, especially after Eleanor, my beloved wife, passed away. "It was a simple agreement," I began, my voice surprisingly steady, a loan disguised as a gift, a test of sorts. My eyes flicked back to Melissa. "Still no eye contact. Good. Letters to attest." The young lawyer echoed, a hint of confusion in his voice. "Yes," I confirmed. "A test of loyalty, of family." The courtroom murmur grew into a low buzz. I could feel the weight of their curiosity, their silent judgment. It didn't bother me. I'd held this secret close for too long. The truth needed to come out. "You see," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "about a year ago, I informed my family that I was facing financial ruin, that I'd lost everything and a bad investment. This was, of course, a fabrication, a carefully constructed lie designed to reveal the true nature of those closest to me. And this contract," the young lawyer prompted. I went to Melissa, explained my predicament, told her I needed a place to stay, some financial assistance. She so generously offered to let me live in what used to be my own guest house. In exchange, I signed a contract promising to bequeath her a significant portion of my estate upon my death. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. The silence was thick, heavy with unspoken accusations. "So you were deceiving your family?" Melissa's lawyer interjected, her voice dripping with disdain. "Objection," my lawyer squeaked. "Calls for speculation." Judge Miller sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Sustained, Ms. Crane. Let Mr. Thompson finish his testimony." I took a slow, deliberate breath. "I was testing them," I corrected, my voice unwavering, testing the bonds of family, seeing if, in my hour of need, they would be there for me. Not for what I could offer them. The memory of that conversation with Melissa, the one where I had laid bare my fabricated financial woes, flooded back. She'd barely looked up from her phone, her thumbs tapping furiously at the screen. "Financial ruin," she'd finally said, her voice devoid of any real concern. "How could you be so careless, Edward? Careless." That's what she'd called me. A man who'd spent his life building a successful business, providing for his family, only to be deemed careless in his old age. The sting of that word, even now, resonated deep within me. "Don't know, Melissa," I'd stammered, playing the part of the distraught old man. It was a bad investment. Everything's gone. Well, she'd said, a flicker of something. Not sympathy, not concern, but something else, something colder, crossing her face. What are you going to do? I was hoping, I'd begun, my voice trembling convincingly, that maybe I could stay with you in the guest house just for a little while, until I can get back on my feet. She'd finally looked at me then, her eyes narrowed, calculating. The guest house, she'd repeated slowly. Well, I suppose we could make arrangements, but it's going to cost you. The audacity of her words had nearly taken my breath away. Cost me to live in a house that was, in part, built with my own money, on land I own. Cost me, I'd echoed, feigning confusion. Of course, she'd said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. We have expenses. David and I are saving for a down payment on a bigger house. We could use the extra income. And so the contract was drawn up, a legally binding document drafted by her own lawyer, outlining the terms of my stay in exchange for room and board in the guest house. I would bequeath a substantial portion of my estate to her upon my death. I looked around the courtroom at the sea of faces, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright disbelief. I could see the wheels turning in their minds, trying to decipher the truth behind this bizarre family drama. "And you signed this contract?" the young lawyer asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I did," I confirmed, my voice firm, "knowing that you were not, in fact, financially ruined?" He pressed. "Yes," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "I signed it because I wanted to know. I needed to know what my family truly valued, me or my money." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. A $62 million secret, a family's greed exposed. This wasn't just about a contract. It was about something far deeper, far more personal. It was about the erosion of trust, the betrayal of family bonds, and the lengths one man would go to uncover the truth. And this courtroom, this was where the truth would finally be revealed. LABEL. Flashback underscore when the aroma of pipe tobacco and lemon polish hung heavy in the air. A scent forever intertwined in my memory with the hushed expectancy of my father's study. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, cast dancing patterns on the Persian rug, a rug I wasn't allowed to step on. Not really. I was 10, maybe 11, small for my age, with a colic that no amount of brushing could tame. My older brother, Robert, 2 years my senior, and already sporting the beginnings of a mustache, or what he claimed was a mustache, lounged in the leather armchair, his feet propped up on the ottoman. Another forbidden act for me. "Edward," my father boomed, his voice a deep rumble that always seemed to vibrate the very foundations of the house. He gestured towards a small, intricately carved wooden box resting on his mahogany desk. "Come here, son." I approached, hesitantly, my heart thudding against my ribs. This ritual, the summoning to the study, usually meant one of two things: a stern lecture or, rarely, a moment of paternal pride. I hoped, with a desperate, childish yearning, that this time it would be the latter. Robert, from his privileged perch, smirked. "Let's see what the old man has for you, Etta," he drawled, the nickname a constant reminder of my perceived inferiority. My father cleared his throat to sound a prelude of pronouncements both grand and trivial. He opened the box, revealing a gleaming gold pocket watch, its face etched with intricate Roman numerals. It wasn't just a watch. It was an heirloom, passed down through generations of Thompsons, a symbol of responsibility and, as my father often reminded us, the weight of legacy. This, he declared, holding the watch aloft, is for you, Robert. My stomach lurched. A cold, hard knot formed in my chest. I had been good, hadn't I? I'd helped Mrs. Higgins carry her groceries. I'd gotten top marks in arithmetic. I'd even resisted the urge to punch Robert when he'd called me shrimp. All for this, I thought, for this moment of recognition. Robert, predictably, preened. He swung his legs off the ottoman and strode towards the desk, a smug grin plastered across his face. He took the watch from my father's hand, examining it with a practiced air of nonchalance that I knew he'd been affecting for weeks, anticipating this very moment. "Thanks, Dad," he mumbled, but his eyes, alight with triumph, spoke volumes. He glanced at me, a flicker of something cruel and knowing in his expression. "But, Father," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "What about me?" My father turned to me, his brow furrowed. He looked at me, really looked at me, and in that gaze I saw not affection, but something akin to disappointment. It was a look that would haunt me for years to come. "Edward," he said, his tone softening slightly, but the words themselves fell like a slap. "You're still young. You haven't earned such a responsibility. Perhaps when you're older, more mature," he trailed off, leaving the sentence hanging in the air like a guillotine blade poised to drop. Robert chuckled, a low, guttural sound that grated on my nerves. I wanted to scream, to stamp my feet, to snatch the watch from his grasp and smash it against the wall, but I didn't. I stood there, frozen, a small, insignificant figure in the grand tapestry of my father's ambition. Besides, my father continued, as if sensing my inner turmoil, "Robert is the eldest." The fluorescent lights of the hospital buzzed overhead, a dull, insistent hum that mirrored the anxiety churning in my gut. Eleanor, bless her heart, sat beside my bed, her hand clasped tightly in mine. Her knuckles were white, her face drawn and pale. "The doctor will be back soon, Edward," she murmured, her voice strained. "Try not to worrying. How could I not? This wasn't just a scraped knee or a seasonal flu. This was, well, I didn't even want to think the words, stroke, debilitating, life-altering. I'm fine, Eleanor," I rasped, my voice thin and unfamiliar. It was a lie, of course. I felt anything but fine. My left side was numb, heavy, unresponsive. A lead weight dragging me down. The doctor, a young man with tired eyes and a forced smile, returned with the results of the MRI. He spoke in gentle, measured tones, explaining the damage, the prognosis, the long road to recovery. I heard the words, but they didn't quite register. They floated around me like dandelion seeds, meaningless and ephemeral. What truly pierced through the fog of fear and confusion was Melissa's voice. "So what does this mean exactly?" she asked, her tone sharp, impatient. "Will he be able to, manage his affairs? My own daughter-in-law asking about my finances before even inquiring about my well-being." A cold knot tightened in my chest. Eleanor squeezed my hand, her eyes flashing with anger. "Melissa," she hissed, "your father-in-law just had a stroke." I know," Melissa said dismissively, waving a manicured hand. "But these things have implications. We need to be practical." Practical. That was Melissa's favorite word. Practicality, in her world, translated to what was most convenient, most advantageous for her and her husband, my son, John. The doctor, bless his soul, tried to steer the conversation back to my health. But Melissa was relentless. She peppered him with questions about my cognitive abilities, my ability to make decisions, my competence. Each word felt like a tiny pinprick, deflating the already fragile balloon of my self-worth. I closed my eyes, pretending to sleep, but I heard everything. Every whispered aside, every concerned glance, every thinly veiled question about my future. And in that sterile, impersonal hospital room, a seed of resentment began to take root. It wasn't the stroke itself that hurt the most. It was the reaction of my own family, the barely concealed impatience, the focus on the practicalities, the unspoken question hanging in the air. What will happen to his money? The days that followed blurred into a monotonous routine of therapy, medication, and forced optimism. Eleanor was my rock, my constant companion, my fierce protector. She shielded me from the worst of Melissa's inquiries, fielded calls from concerned relatives, and kept a watchful eye on my progress. John, my son, visited occasionally, his face etched with a mixture of concern and something else. Guilt, embarrassment, I couldn't quite decipher it. He asked the obligatory questions about my health, but his eyes kept drifting towards the window, towards the world outside, towards, I suspected, his own life, which was undoubtedly inconvenienced by my sudden illness. Melissa's visits were even more infrequent, and when she did appear, she brought with her an air of strained politeness, a forced cheerfulness that grated on my nerves. She spoke to me as if I were a child, simplifying her sentences, patting my hand condescendingly. "How are we feeling today, Edward?" she'd ask, her voice dripping with false concern. "I'm not a child, Melissa," I'd snap, my voice raspy but firm. "Of course not, Edward," she'd reply smoothly, her smile never faltering, "just trying to be helpful." Another one of her favorite words, her helpfulness, however, always seemed to coincide with her own self-interest. One afternoon, while Eleanor was out running errands, Melissa came to visit. She sat by my bedside, her expression unusually serious. "Edward," she began, her voice low and confidential, "we need to talk about your finances." I knew it. This was what it had all been leading to. "What about them?" I asked, my voice flat. "Well," she continued, fidgeting with her purse strap, "John and I are concerned about your ability to manage things. Now that you know," she trailed off, leaving the unspoken implication hanging in the air, "incompetent, a burden, a drain on their resources." "I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs, Melissa," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. Of course," she said quickly, her smile returning. "But wouldn't it be easier for everyone if we helped you? Just until you're back on your feet, help me." Another loaded word in Melissa's vocabulary. Her help always came with strings attached, with unspoken expectations, with a price tag. "I appreciate your concern, Melissa," I said, my voice tight, "but I'm not ready to hand over control of my life just yet." Her smile faltered. For a moment, a flicker of annoyance crossed her face, quickly masked by a renewed expression of concern. "We just want what's best for you, Edward," she said softly. "I'm sure you do," I replied, my eyes fixed on hers. The air in the room crackled with unspoken tension. We stared at each other for a long moment, two adversaries locked in a silent battle of wills. Finally, she broke the silence. "Well," she said, rising to her feet, I should be going. I'll let you rest." She leaned down and kissed my cheek, a perfunctory gesture that felt cold and impersonal. "Give my love to Eleanor," she said as she walked towards the door. "I will," I reply, my voice barely a whisper. As the door clicked shut behind her, I closed my eyes, exhaustion washing over me. The stroke had weakened my body, but it had also sharpened my mind. It had stripped away the layers of politeness and pretense, revealing the raw, unvarnished truth about my family. And in that moment of clarity, I made a decision that would change everything. A subtle test exposes decades of hidden resentments. I would show them what practical truly meant. The courtroom air hung thick with anticipation, heavy as the mahogany table before me. Melissa shifted in her seat, the expensive fabric of her suit rustling like autumn leaves. Her gaze darted between me and the judge, a nervous tick flickering in her left eye. I allowed myself a small, inward smile. She had no idea. None of them did, Mr. Thompson. Judge Miller's voice, a dry, seasoned rasp, cut through the silence. "Do you have anything further to add before we adjourn for the day?" My family, arrayed before me like vultures waiting for a carcass, held their breath. My son, John, sat beside Melissa, his face a mask of strained indifference. He hadn't looked me in the eye since this charade began. He'd assumed, like the rest of them, that my supposed financial ruin was genuine. A subtle test exposes decades of hidden resentments, indeed. It had exposed far more than I'd ever imagined. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in my hands. Age had taken its toll, but my mind, thankfully, remained sharp. "I do." Melissa coughed a sharp, brittle sound. "Edward, really, must we drag this out any longer?" She whispered, loud enough for the court to hear. "It's unpleasant for everyone. Unpleasant for her, perhaps, to see her carefully constructed world crumbling around her." I ignored her, my gaze fixed on Judge Miller. "Your Honor, I'd like to call a witness." A ripple of unease went through my family. John straightened, his indifference cracking to reveal a flicker of apprehension. What witness could I possibly have? They thought they had stripped me bare, reduced me to a pauper. They had underestimated me. "Very well," Judge Miller said, consulting his notes. "And the name of this witness?" "Mr. Charles Higgins," I replied, my voice clear and strong. The name echoed in the silent courtroom. Charles Higgins, my lawyer, my friend, and the keeper of my secrets. He entered the courtroom with the quiet confidence of a man who held all the cards. He nodded to me respectfully before taking the stand. The next hour passed in a blur. Charles, with meticulous precision, laid out the truth. He presented documents, bank statements, investment portfolios, all meticulously crafted to maintain the illusion of my destitution while safeguarding my actual wealth. He explained the trust I had established years ago, a trust designed to provide for my family, but only after they had proven their worth. A worth I now realized they sorely lacked. I watched their faces as the truth unfolded. Melissa's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the pallor that crept into her cheeks. John's jaw clenched, his eyes wide with disbelief. Eleanor, my wife of 50 years, sat stunned, her hand fluttering to her chest. Had she truly believed I was ruined, or had she, too, been playing a part? Charles' testimony continued, detailing the conversations I'd recorded, the emails I'd saved, all documenting their callous disregard for my well-being, their eagerness to divide my supposed spoils. They hadn't even waited for the dust to settle before plotting to carve up what they believed was left of my estate. "Objection," John finally sputtered, his voice choked with indignation. "This is entrapment. He set us up." Judge Miller raised a hand, silencing him. "Mr. Thompson," he addressed me, his voice laced with a hint of curiosity, "care to explain the purpose of this elaborate charade?" I rose slowly, my joints protesting, but my spirit invigorated. This was my moment, the moment I had waited for, planned for, meticulously orchestrated. "Your Honor," I began, my voice resonating with a strength I hadn't felt in years. "I wanted to know the truth. I wanted to see the true faces of the people I call family. I wanted to see if their love and loyalty extended beyond the size of my bank account." I paused, letting my words sink in. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. I could feel their gazes upon me, a mixture of shock, anger, and something else, fear. "And what did you find, Mr. Thompson?" Judge Miller prompted gently. "I found," I said, my voice hardening, "that blood is not always thicker than water. I found that greed can corrode even the strongest bonds. I found that the people I thought I knew best were strangers in disguise." I turned my gaze to my family, my eyes lingering on each of their faces. Melissa avoided my gaze, her face flushed with shame. John stared back defiantly, his eyes blazing with resentment. But it was Eleanor's face that held my attention. Her expression was unreadable, a mixture of sadness, regret, and, perhaps, a flicker of understanding. This is monstrous," John finally exploded, jumping to his feet. "You played us. You humiliated us." "Humiliated you?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You humiliated yourselves. You revealed your true selves, John, and for that I am eternally grateful." I turned back to Judge Miller. "Your Honor, I rest my case." The judge nodded, his eyes filled with a knowing look. "This court will recess until tomorrow morning, at which time I will deliver my verdict." As the gavel fell, signaling the end of the day's proceedings, I felt a sense of weary satisfaction wash over me. This wasn't over, not yet. But the truth was out, the masks had fallen, and Edward Thompson, the supposedly ruined old man, had played them all. Winning the lottery becomes the ultimate revenge. This wasn't about the money, not really. It was about something far more valuable, the truth. And the truth, as they say, will set you free. It had certainly freed me. The courtroom air, thick with anticipation, crackled like static. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the beams. My knuckles, white against the worn wood of the witness stand, ached. Judge Mallory cleared his throat. "Mr. Thompson," he addressed me, his voice echoing in the hushed chamber, "do you have any final statements before I deliver my verdict?" My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the culmination of months of planning, of swallowing my pride, of watching the mask of familial love slip from the faces of those I held dearest. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I do." I looked at Melissa, my daughter-in-law, her face a carefully constructed mask of concern. It was a mask I'd seen often in these past months, a mask that had chipped and cracked under the pressure of my supposed financial ruin. She'd been so solicitous when she thought I was penniless, so eager to get me into Theta Economicalist's living facility. "Melissa, dear," I began, my voice dripping with a false sweetness that mirrored her own. "Do you remember those conversations we had about my limited resources?" Her eyes flickered, a tiny twitch in the corner of her mouth. "Of course, Edward," she stammered. "We were only concerned for your well-being." "Concern," I chuckled, a dry, brittle sound. "Concerned about how my dwindling funds would impact your inheritance, perhaps." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Melissa's carefully crafted facade crumbled, her face flushed crimson. "That's not true," she cried, her voice shrill. "You're twisting things." "Am I asked, turning my gaze to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the testimony. You've seen the evidence. You've witnessed the true colors of my family, the ones they thought were hidden from my sight." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle in the silence. A father's heartbreaking revelation. His family's true colors. "That's what this is." I reached into my breast pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the letter. The letter Eleanor, my wife of 50 years, had written to her sister, outlining their plan to convince me to sign over my assets to them, to secure their future, a future she apparently didn't see me being a part of. My hand trembled slightly as I unfolded the paper. "This letter," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and sorrow, "was written by my wife, Eleanor. It details their intentions, their greed, their utter disregard for my well-being." I handed the letter to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Judge Mallory read the letter in silence, his brow furrowed in concentration. The courtroom was utterly still, the only sound the rustling of the paper in the judge's hands. Eleanor sat beside Melissa, her face ashen. She wouldn't meet my eyes. This is quite damning evidence, Mr. Thompson," Judge Mallory finally said, his voice grave. "It is the truth, Your Honor," I replied, my voice firm. "A subtle test exposes decades of hidden resentments. I merely provided the opportunity for them to reveal themselves." I looked at Eleanor again, my heart aching with a profound sadness. We'd built a life together, shared joys and sorrows, raised a family, or so I thought. Had any of it been real? Had her love, her concern, been nothing more than a performance, a calculated strategy to secure her financial future? The judge cleared his throat. "In light of this new evidence," he declared, "I find in favor of the plaintiff, Edward Thompson. The previous will is hereby invalidated, and Mr. Thompson retains full control of his assets." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Melissa let out a strangled cry. Eleanor remained silent, her gaze fixed on the floor. I felt a strange sense of emptiness. I had won. I had exposed their greed, protected my assets. But what had I truly gained? My family, the people I love, had shown their true colors, and those colors were painted with betrayal and avarice. Winning the lottery becomes the ultimate revenge. Indeed, it had been a lottery of sorts, a test of character that had revealed the ugly truth beneath the surface of familial affection. Furthermore, Judge Mallory continued, his voice ringing with authority, "Given the nature of Mrs. Thompson's actions, I am ordering a full investigation into her financial dealings. There is strong reason to believe undue influence and potential fraud were involved in the previous will." Signing, Eleanor finally looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "No," she cried, her voice cracking. "You can't do this." But it was too late. The wheels of justice were in motion, and the truth, like a relentless die, was washing away the carefully constructed lies that had propped up their deceitful charade. One father's silent war against his ungrateful family, My silent war was over, but the battlefield, strewn with the wreckage of broken trust and shattered illusions, remained. I slowly rose from the witness stand, my legs shaky. The courtroom buzzed with whispers and murmurs. I didn't look back at Eleanor or Melissa. There was nothing left to say. The silence, the empty space where love and trust had once resided, spoke volumes. As I walked out of the courtroom, bathed in the warm afternoon sunlight, I felt a strange sense of liberation. The weight of their betrayal, the burden of their deceit, had lifted. I was free. Free from the illusion of family, free from the shackles of their greed. I had lost much, but I had also gained something invaluable, the truth. And sometimes the bitter truth is the most liberating revelation of all. Family loyalty versus self-interest. A devastating showdown. It was a showdown I hadn't sought, but one I had ultimately won. A $62 million secret sets the stage for a thrilling revenge. The secret was out, the revenge complete, and I was finally, truly free.